where exactly is Turkey? Is it in the west or in the east? A reliable actor or a reliable partner?
This is perhaps the most difficult question because the answer varies for everyone.
I also come across this issue very often in the meetings that I attend.
Imagine a country that's a NATO member, yet heavily purchased Russian arms. It simultaneously engages with both the European Union and the BRICS. It supports Ukraine to the fullest, yet imposes not a single sanction on Russia. One day, it faces a crisis with Europe, the next it conducts a huge portion of its trade with them. From the outside, it looks like complete chaos, doesn't it? Everyone who sees this picture has one question in mind. Where does Turkey actually stand?
We don't feel this just as citizens, as individuals, as those living in the country. European politicians looking at Turkey feel the same way. Commentators trying to analyze Turkey feel the same way. Journalists writing about Turkey ask the same questions.
Turkey says it warned the Russian jet 10 times it was violating Turkish airspace.
Construction of the Akku nuclear power plant. Turkey's.
We begin the signing ceremony for the agreements between the Turkish and Ukrainian governments.
Turkey with its F-35 fighter jets. Selim called
Turkey has one of the most powerful armies actually in the world.
Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool.
When you look at Turkey, if you don't get too involved in Turkey's foreign policy and don't look at long-term changes, it actually seems like it is undergoing big changes every day. It might appear to be zigzagging big time.
I often go to Germany, we visit other countries, and we encounter these kinds of questions.
But the problem might be in the question itself. What we see isn't actually a contradiction, but the product of a strategy. In this video, we're trying to understand step by step the real logic behind these confusing steps Turkey has taken in the last 15 years. In the old days, everything was much simpler. During the Cold War period, Turkey was a very clear member of the Western Alliance. Its course was absolutely clear. Close relations with the United States, integration with Europe. But after the 2010s, things slowly started to change. Ankara drew closer to Russia, while also opening its doors to the global south. It engaged with the European Union and the Shanghai Five. It began to pursue a tough policy and display its military power in the surrounding region. Turkey's traditional allies, observing this zigzagging foreign policy, began to think that Turkey was experiencing a shift in its axis and to question its reliability. Actually, there's a concept that will help us understand all these seemingly contradictory moves: strategic autonomy. So, what does it mean?
So actually, this is not a new concept, but it is being discussed much more widely today, both from Turkey's and the European Union's point of view. The search in this context is to develop alternative connections outside of traditional allied relationships, and particularly to achieve greater autonomy in foreign policy and security matters, which means to be more free.
In my opinion, Turkey's actual situation is not an untrustworthy partner. Turkey seeks autonomy, striving to create its own space in foreign policy and in its immediate environment.
Turkey is no longer willing to conduct its foreign policy as an automatic extension of any alliance. Does this mean a complete separation from the West? No. Ankara's priority is clear: to ensure its own security and, when necessary, to have the space to make decisions at the table without asking anyone, sometimes with the West, sometimes with Russia, and sometimes with Middle Eastern countries. This is the doctrine it has applied to its foreign policy moves, especially over the last 15 years. This is not a deviation, but rather a conscious effort to expand its sphere of influence.
So this is not about leaving a specific bloc, but rather I think it's about creating more space for itself, especially in its own geography, the Caucasus, Middle East, Black Sea, Mediterranean and Eastern Mediterranean, and keeping its options open.
There are three fundamental factors that are truly decisive here. The most important and truly significant factor is the end of the Cold War, and following that, the entire understanding of global security underwent a profound and lasting transformation. In the meantime, major and significant developments that occur approximately every 10 years, such as the Iraq War and the Arab Spring, profoundly and deeply influence this entire ongoing process. Secondly, over these past 15 years, Turkey has fallen out with its traditional allies. After the Syrian civil war began, Turkey first found itself in different fronts with the United States. In the early 2000s, the EU accession process, which Turkey had joined with great enthusiasm, first paused and then, in time, almost completely stopped. Finally, the unfolding events in Turkey's immediate neighborhood opened up space for this kind of mobilization. In fact, this balancing act is not very new for Turkey. When we look at the Ottoman Empire's last century, we see it spent that time trying to survive by striking a similar balance among great powers.
This is roughly a 200-year-old policy, at least that's what I think. Historically, we've always talked about this. It's often discussed in our history classes, the last 150 to 200 years of the Ottoman Empire. The leaders who founded the Republic of Turkey, who were students of this period, followed a similar policy during the War of Independence.
The situation was similar in the early years of the Republic. Pragmatic relations with the Soviets, delicate balances with the West. Let's even recall that famous active neutrality policy during World War II. What we see today in the Russia-Ukraine war is actually a modern version of that historical reflex. Support Ukraine, but don't close the door on Russia. From the outside, a contradiction. From the inside, a search for balance. We can summarize the relationship between Turkey and Russia in one word: co-opetition, meaning competitive cooperation. They are neither fully friends nor fully enemies.
And the competitive collaboration model actually means that while competing with each other in certain regions, thanks to the relationships being layered, they can also collaborate against third parties in different regions. Their approach is like, let's not let others enter the field. Let's compete only with each other and share whatever there is.
It involves energy, trade, and tourism. But on the other hand, in Syria, Libya, Karabakh, and Ukraine, they constantly find themselves confronting each other. So they are together at the negotiating table, yet rivals on the battlefield. In fact, the historical rivalry between Turkey and Russia, which has led to many wars, has not disappeared. But the two countries appear to have developed a new formula for managing this complex relationship. While there are areas where we clash at the same time, there are also places where we can cooperate, and both can proceed separately at the same time. So why has the distance between Turkey and the West widened? The stalled membership process on the European front, the Cyprus issue, and the never-ending perception of double standards have strained relations. Turkey started to feel like a guardian that Europe remembers only in the refugee crisis. On the United States side, there was a complete crisis of trust. The support given to the PYD in Syria and the events after 2016 coup attempt in Turkey really escalated tensions. Ankara's message was clear: you are not taking my security concerns seriously. But in the last few years, the tide has started to turn once again.
There are two fundamental challenges here. One is that Russia has become a major threat to Europe. At a time when the Russian threat has once again become clearly apparent, America declares, that's enough. I'm pulling out. Do whatever you have to do. Ensure your own security. I no longer wish to be responsible for this. The very moment America says this, Europe's security concerns suddenly come to the forefront very acutely.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Europe's search for a new security architecture have made Turkey indispensable again, because everyone now knows that without Turkey, it is impossible to ensure security in the Black Sea, the Caucasus, or the Eastern Mediterranean.
Turkey is currently perceived as a strong country, difficult to ignore, truly influential in its own geography.
Now in Europe, there is Ukraine, who has not moved into a non-defense sphere and is capable of fighting. They are fighting, and they made very significant progress. Ukraine also suffered tremendous losses, so therefore you have no chance of entrusting entire European security to Ukraine. And there is also Turkey.
What we are witnessing at this moment is a process of repairing relations with the West and realignment, but this time it's quite different for both sides.
So Europe's perspective on Turkey has changed very sharply. The war Russia launched against Ukraine, and then Trump's re-election as US president, I believe, completely altered the perspective on Turkey. We actually saw this very clearly during German Chancellor Merz's recent visit to Turkey. Compared to the past, he didn't extensively address topics such as the rule of law, democracy, or human rights violations. This actually shows us that the perspective towards Turkey has changed quite radically.
The relationship between Turkey and its traditional partners has evolved from the question of whether we share the same values to what common interests we have and in which areas we can cooperate. So, can this approach truly work in the long run?
Yes, this search for strategic autonomy has been going on for some time. To some extent, certain connections have been developed, but as of now, a network of relationships that would fully meet Turkey's needs has not yet been established there. So we need significant financial resources to sustain and revitalize the Turkish economy. We cannot get this from Russia, we cannot get this from China, we cannot get this solely from the Gulf. This comes within the framework of our relations with Europe, within the framework of our relations with the West.
In my opinion, Turkey is a country that goes beyond mere functional collaborations in certain areas. All right, let our trade flourish, let's work together on security, on migration, and on energy. However, I also believe that we must adhere to the same principles and the same values. Therefore, I truly hope that the stage is not entirely left to those who view Turkey solely through the lens of migration and security.